Namaste and greetings. I, Tripta Behra, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we are gathered for a discussion on the topic Breaking Down Bengaluru Floods. This deliberation is a part of the #Local Governance series organized by the IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, CHURS. As the moderator for the session and series, we have Shri Tikender Singh Panwar, former Deputy Mayor, Shimla, and Senior Fellow IMPRI, New Delhi. We are also joined by esteemed guests today. We have Leo F. Saldanha, Coordinator and Founding Trustee, Environment Support Group, ESG, Bangalore. And we also have Ms. Bhargavi S. Senior Fellow and Trustee, Environment Support Group, ESG, Bangalore. Now I would like to invite our moderator, Shri Tikender Singh Panwar, to initiate the deliberation with his opening remarks and to invite our distinguished speakers and proceed further. We look forward to learning from the esteemed gathering here today. Thank you. Without further ado, I would request Shri Tikender sir to begin. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Tripta, and welcome Leo and Bhargavi. Both are very dear friends. And it's really very nice to see you here, this virtual meet. And just to let you know that, #local governance, we've been running series of episodes on issues particularly issues pertaining to urban sector, particularly urbanization, the kind of urbanization that is unfolding, and especially in a period of last 3 decades, but especially when neo-liberal reforms struck the Indian surface, and all that hullabaloo was created, that now there'll be a magic wand and many of our urban problems will get ameliorated through this new discourse that we were discussing about. But 3 decades down the line, we find that, in fact, problems have been accentuated. And today we are here to actually discuss about the Bengaluru floods. And Leo and Bhargavi, I would like you to, when you speak about Bengaluru, to also just contextualize it a little, because it's not just Bengaluru. It's, in fact, all the urban centers across the country which are facing, this immense challenge of urban flooding. And though we don't have some metadata to that, to correlate some of the general observations that emanates from some of our urban experts, who are actually screaming and saying that, look, the way you have been actually pushing more project-oriented approach, the whole concept of smart cities, bringing in lots of material infrastructure, not recognizing the fact that there is a city that exists, that has its own dynamics, and that's also one of the major reasons that we talk about Patna, you talk about Delhi, Gurgaon. Gurgaon people get scared even when they see the clouds. Forget about when it rains. So even the clouds scare people in Gurgaon, and we've seen one of the worst forms of flooding that happened in Bengaluru. And one of my friends told me that Bengaluru, the class, the whole question of class also was very starkly seen, where, some of the middle class colony, they pumped water, and that pumped water was thrown into some of the slums outside. And then that's how the slums got inundated. So the many dynamics to the way we are building our cities, the whole question of city planning, the whole question of people's participation are even they taken into consideration. Forget about the veto power that we have been fighting in the hills, where where if you have to construct a hydropower, you require some amount of people's assent. And if you don't have the assent, then you can't construct a hydropower in some of the valleys. So now the same laws are also being changed. So can we just reimagine, can we just rethink, the kind of future that we visualize? I mean, this is not sustainable at all. So not going beyond that, because we are, we're waiting to hear from two of our very esteemed guests and two of my very great friends, Bhargavi and Leo. Tripta, can you just please introduce Bhargavi first, because Bhargavi is going to take the lead and then Leo will join. And of course, for our participants who are there on the Facebook and on Zoom, you can just throw the questions on the chat box or even the Facebook. So we'll just keep track of those questions and just pass on those questions to our guests so that they can.
Definitely, sir.
Yeah, they can.
A very warm welcome to you, Bhargavi ma'am. Bhargavi S is a senior fellow and trustee at Environment Support Group ESG Bengaluru. Ma'am, would you take it from here, please?
Thank you, Tripta. Thank you, Tikender ji. I'll just share my screen and I will just set the tone for the talk, describing exactly what is happening in most of our cities today and why we are in the situation that we are. Just give me a minute.
At the bottom, you find the button.
Yeah, no, I found it. Yeah, so the last few weeks we've been looking at what is happening in Bangalore, and we've just been one very disturbed, and the other one, the fact that we had predicted these things from the very beginning. To kind of go over the many points that has resulted in today's situation. It could be floods, it could be droughts, it could be any other disaster situation in any of our cities. So first of all, in the early 2000s, we managed to participate in a variety of the public consultations that were part of the EIA for all the apartment complexes and the commercial complexes. But in 2006, EIA underwent a major dilution, and a large section of such complexes, the apartment complexes and commercial complexes, were removed from purview of public consultation, and they created provisions. A few which were less than 20,000 square feet did not require anything. Those which were between 20,000 to 50,000 could get approvals from the state authorities, so on and so forth. Category A, B, C, we all know how those things have been going on. So basically this was done to push urban infrastructure, which largely helped the real estate agencies. And to add to the real estate agencies, we also had our cities that have been growing with the help of the confusion that the parastatals create. I can definitely speak for Bangalore, because in Bangalore we have BDA, we have BMRDA, we have KIDB, and the newer neighborhoods that have been created have become authorities by themselves. For example, the Bangalore International Airport Area Authority plans for itself. It's a planning authority. Similarly, Electronic City has become an authority by itself, so it plans for itself. And there is absolutely no coordination when such planning takes place. So with the lack of public consultation, public oversight, the cities started growing. Any city for that matter today, but I've seen this happen even in Hyderabad. Most of the cities, as they are expanding, they engulf all the smaller little villages and towns, completely disregarding the local ecological landscapes. And this also kind of makes way for sand mining in most of the riverbeds and lake beds. And it, like I said, it has opened up a variety of not just apartment complexes, but also SEZs and stone mining, granite mining, and a variety of industrial zones as well. And in addition to this, the way in which the cities are used have also changed. There's been a lot of dilution between the commercial and the residential demarcations. So most of the residential neighborhoods today have become partially commercial, and that has further added to the pressure on the cities. And while all of this is happening, most of the building bylaws have, they've been a little outdated and they've never been updated based on current realities. And then nobody ever follows these building bylaws. It's very easy to violate the building bylaws and go around building however one wants. And this has significantly altered the way we live, the way we interact with all our natural resources around us. And then, for example, Karnataka state has the Town and Country Planning Act of 1961, and accordingly there are guidelines, there are rules, but all of this has been sidestepped over a period of time. So in the mid 2000s, Bangalore saw a lot of road widening, and that's when we went to court and made sure that the provisions of the Town and Country Planning Act were implemented. But that again has been sidestepped everywhere when the city has been growing. Then if you look at what has happened to all the various committees that have been set up to look into various issues of the city, every city I'm sure has some kind of the committee or the other. So for example, in Bangalore, we have had the Lakshman Rao committee way back in 1988, which was a government of Karnataka appointed committee. Then the A.T. Ramaswamy committee, which was the Karnataka legislature body had set it up. Then later on, we had the court appointed N.K. Patil committee. And N.K. Patil himself was a sitting judge at that time. The first time ever a sitting judge was made the chairperson of committee. And these committees have given very exhaustive, very robust recommendations on how lakes have to be managed, or how such resources have to be very judiciously used. But none of these recommendations are ever incorporated into city planning. Then we also have a variety of ecological and sociological analysis that has come from academia. And also, for example, in Bangalore, we have the Birdwatchers Field Club, which has been contributing significantly since the 80s, doing a lot of bird census in and around Bangalore and telling exactly which lake is dying and which lake needs better management, which lake has sewage entering, so on and so forth. But even these kind of studies, which give us the indicators, because birds are the indicators of the health of the water, have been completely disregarded. Then we have institutions like IMPRI, CES in Bangalore, which have given fantastic reports of stating the scientific, with evidence of the water quality of every lake in and around Bangalore. But even such studies have been completely sidelined and forgotten and not put to use at all when it came to city planning. Then we've had court orders. Court orders have been coming one after the other in Karnataka and in Bangalore. So in Bangalore, in 2013, a whole lot of industries which sat on the bed of Arkavati were asked to phase out. And much later, our own case, which we filed in 2008 on the issue of privatization of lakes, has been going on for a very long time, and the final order had come in 2012. And then another lake related case, which was filed in 2014, also came out with an excellent order, which gave exactly how lakes have to be protected and managed. But none of this has been incorporated by the various authorities. And then there's also been a lot of confusion between the authorities. Like I said, the parastatals and various authorities in Bangalore are often fighting over whose jurisdiction each and every lake is They don't even know which lake falls under them. This was the story until the recent past. And then the Bangalore master plans have largely been non-inclusive. It's mostly been foreign consultants sitting in France or Singapore or one of those countries, designing for Bangalore, with having absolutely no idea of how these spaces are used by the local communities and how these spaces support a variety of local livelihoods, and giving no regard to the fact that a city like Bangalore is water starved because we don't have a river close by. The nearest river is 100 kilometers away. Completely disregarding all these ecological factors, the master plans have been coming, and these master plans are pretty secretive because not everybody gets to see it. It is exhibited somewhere in some center auditorium of the city, and everybody is expected to go there, look at it, and give their recommendations or comments. But not everybody can even read the map, right? So it's definitely not an inclusive process. So the master plans have also failed to predict what the city is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years, because none of the plans are actually in that. Then the ward committees that are supposed to play a very critical role in local governance have always been dysfunctional since 1992. They had never been set up. But again, various civil society groups in every city have been pushing this, and in Karnataka, in Bangalore, our own case pushed the court to make sure that these committees were formed. But again, those committees have been set up had been set up very half-heartedly, and only a few committees met every now and then, or they never met. So even if they met, the minutes of the meeting were never discussed, or they never discussed issues that were pertaining to those wards. So variety of problems there, and so the ward committees are largely dysfunctional. And as a result, whatever rehabilitation has been underway, either through CSR support or funding from the government itself, they have been in complete blindness to the ecological landscape of the city. So many of the lakes, the last 1.5 decades, almost 2 decades now, some of the lakes have been rehabilitated in Bangalore, but they have completely disregarded the structure of the lake. And the way it has been regarded, like you see in the picture here, it typically has some desiltation process that takes place, and the silt that is removed is either put into islands, or it is put all around to make a jogging and a walking track, and creating a soup bowl like structure. So ecologically, the soup bowl kind of structure probably cannot hold the kind of rain that comes once in a while like this. Whereas in the past, the original structures of the lake did have the capacity to hold that water. Then also, this entire planning has been very undemocratic and unscientific. Sorry, the text is a little bit all over the place. So basically, when planning takes place, it is very poorly planned. It has largely made way for the big industries, and in the context of Hyderabad and Bangalore, it's largely GDP driven too, because the IT companies have certainly been favored. IT and BT companies have been favored quite a bit, making sure that their industrial complexes and homes and apartment complexes and commercial complexes come up without any hassle. And the way they have been set up, they have definitely encroached on lakes and lake beds and a variety of other commons like the grazing pastures or the forest, the urban forest. And this entire planning has made way for a city of vehicles, and particularly cars, with the ITBT companies giving interest-free loans to the employees. Everybody has landed up buying 2-3 cars, and you obviously need to go down 2-3 floors to ensure there is parking. And when such parking is built, obviously it takes away the areas where water can percolate down. And also when such neighborhoods have come, they've basically engulfed the little villages all around. So the very areas that flooded were areas where a lot of horticulture flourished in Bangalore. And that was the area from where vegetables came to Bangalore. But today that entire belt has this new city, which eventually got flooded. And when these new areas were built, also the main problem were the arteries and veins of the old neighborhood were not connected well to the evolving, emerging neighborhood. So whatever was left after all these buildings were built have become roads. And as a result, they're all, choking, and there's no place for either people or cars or now water. And as a result, the outer ring road today in Bangalore is largely referred to as the outer river road, because that is the road that is completely flooded. So the impacts of such planning is obviously felt by the poor, because when these things happen, they lose out on everything. Their homes are just washed away, and every little thing is washed away. We all saw videos of news where children's school bags had gone, books had gone, practically everything is gone. And for them to rebuild their life, whether they are relocated in a new place or rebuilding their homes in the same place, it just takes the life out of them, because there is very little support, and they also have to get back to work. And these are the places that are so badly inundated that it also will give rise to a whole lot of epidemics sooner or later, and they are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this. And with very little assets that are remaining, obviously there is little chance for them to take a loan or borrow money from others, and they are left to just fend for themselves. Whereas the others who were living in all the gated communities, they managed to live in all the hotels there. The hotels were running at 30,000 to 40,000 per night. And they managed to go live in the hotel and get back home after the waters were pumped out. And the brunt of this is definitely women, children, and senior citizens. And as a result, the poor get sucked into this vicious cycle, and it leads to very deep and acute poverty. Another point here is, the religious and caste minorities are also the ones who are feeling the brunt of it. And it is not just the current planning. The foundation to such discrimination had started way back when the original city was planned itself. So I will stop there and request you to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhargavi. Am I audible? Is this okay? Tripta, are you there?
Yes, sir, working fine.
Yes, sir. All
Fine. Because I've just removed those earphones. Really.
So should I start? Or?
Your voice broke out. I think he's had some network issues. We'll be back shortly.
Yes, some issues with Tikender, sir. I'll follow. Leo, sir, why don't you proceed then?
Okay, so, all right. Trying to show you some slides, but I'll come to that later maybe. I think Bhargavi has given us an excellent analysis of what's behind the floods and or the droughts that takes place in urbanized areas, or how our cities are set up to be constantly and consistently and frequently victims of, I wouldn't even call, say the victims is the right word, but recipients of the consequences of unintelligent action, be it from the point of view of governance or administration or fair and square employment of what is called common sense. And there's plenty of common sense in this region. And that's one thing that I want to emphasize. And this common sense is what has created human settlements for thousands of years. So from about 4 to 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, if settlements have risen, it is by employing that most affordable common sense that without water you can't live. And if you can't live, you can't trade, and so on. So they planned their urban settlements as soon as we stopped being hunter-gatherers and moved from farming to trading. We realized the importance of dense settlements means two things. One, you have to bring water in, and you have to take the used water in a safe way so it doesn't affect the downstream city or town or village or whatever. More importantly, yourself. You don't want to be part of the vicious cycle of contamination. So the best examples are Rakiganj or Mohenjo-daro, or you name one of the Harappan cities. There are 130 sites apparently which have been identified. We don't know how many more, and they all seem to resemble one basic idea of urbanism. That is the acute centrality of common sense. And it does not require major degrees in planning, because there were no colleges to offer them that. And now we have all these massive infrastructure of education, which provides that education, provides those degrees. And why is common sense absent in that? That's one of the most confounding features of our urban areas today. You take the way we work with our streets. It is common sense that the streets need to have pavement to walk on. But the pavements also need to be well drained so that you don't sink inside it. One of the most common aspects of death during floods is that you're walking and you suddenly get sucked into a drain. Now, it does not require anything more than simple humanism to realize that you don't want your neighbor, you don't want a stranger, you don't want anybody or anybody's kid to be washed into a drain and completely gone. And this is not the first time that we have heard this is happening in Bangalore. We have had Justice Santosh Hegde was the Lokayukta about 10, 12 years ago. And he launched a search for a young boy called, if I'm not mistaken, Abhishek, whose body was eventually found 6-7 kilometers later, from where his mother was walking with him. And just imagine the pain of a mother who was walking with a boy, trying to hold an umbrella so that he doesn't get wet. And below his feet, earth opens up and swallows him. And it is not because he made a mistake or she made a mistake, but she has to live with the horrible hollowness of not having that kid in her life now. And hundreds of lives like that have been wasted and destroyed across our cities. I mean, it's floods as one way in which we can see the worst of it, but we also see that in the terms of how civil infrastructure, civic infrastructure is created, that we are so unmindful of a simple fact that it could even be your own kid who is driving a motorbike and crashes into a pothole, gets tossed, crashes on his head, or she crashes on her head, breaks her neck, and may never recover in a coma, or worse, may die. And India has at least 160,000 people who are killed this way, and 10 times more who are injured. And these are the official numbers according to the National Crime Bureau. And most of these accidents happen in urban areas. The point is that our sense of urbanism is lacking in humanism. It has become cultivated by an aggressive notion of capitalism in which it's a dog-eat-dog world. And that dog-eat-dog world is what causes this kind of disaster. And as Bhargavi showed in the images, you saw the lakes. People travel globally. And they go and see these lakes in Switzerland and Canada and the Great Lakes, and they come back and say, we don't have lakes like that in Bangalore. Let's have these lakes. Now, the problem with these people is that they have globally traveled. And they are either nourish, or they are politically well connected, or they just happen to be our MLAs and MPs who got onto a junket, went to Shanghai or Switzerland or Singapore or somewhere, and they don't realize, they don't understand the histories of these locales. Of course, in Shanghai, there is no democracy. So is the problem with Singapore. And in the highly referendum-based democracy that Switzerland is, their lakes they are destroyed and they have revived them over time. And same with the North American lakes. They were acidified by extraordinary pollution of the type that we don't see there now, but they have exported their pollution to Philippines and Indonesia and China and India. And so they can keep their country clean. But the point is that when you see those lakes now and come back and say, we want that, and then you set up these ringed fences, walking paths and parks and so on, you effectively are throwing common sense into the gutter. And one of the most effective forms of representation of that is the overdeveloped lakes. So whenever we look at lake, we don't have lake governance authorities, we have lake development authorities. So the catchphrase is development and not governance. It is not about listening to the earth, understanding how water moves, building your settlements with the flow of the water, not against it, living within the limits of nature, and not, exerting, or demonstrating the hubristic tendency that we have that, we don't care. We can always get water from faraway rivers. So one of the problems of Bangalore is not just the fact that we get too much rain in too short a time, because that's the kind of intense extreme weather events that is considered to be more and more frequent as part of climate change. If you look at the last 100 years of Met analysis, you find that the last 5 years we have had extraordinarily intense rainfalls. During the months of November and December, as a kid growing up, I would always recall we would take an umbrella not because it would pour on us, but because there would be this nice light rain that would be coming all through the evenings and early mornings. I know it was fun to walk around, but it also caught a cold. So mufflers were out and you basically made sure that you didn't get wet. The rain didn't fall in 2 hours. It fell over 8, 9, 10, 20 hours and lightly, and it got absorbed. And then we had a lot of open ground, open spaces. The canals were not built into. But as the city got densified, as wealth got created, and the wealth needed to find itself an expression, it found it in concrete, steel, glass, aluminum constructions, which we call corporate complexes, malls, road infrastructure, metro lines, and none of which realized that you cannot concretize a city and then escape its consequences. So I just want to show a few slides to illustrate what I'm saying has happened to Bangalore, and this could be of any, basically, any city in our country at least. And of course, after Pakistan, I don't know what to say, but South Asia perhaps, or rest of the world where cities do not look at, one second, let me just try to, yeah, okay. So if you see, this is Bangalore, and what you basically should distinguish, there's an AZ red line, which is the built so-called planning area of Bangalore. And I'm trying to, 1 minute, see why I can't remove this. Yeah, anyway, what you can see is the concretization of the land surface. The fact that it also has increased vertically in the city center and also around the periphery is another matter. But by and large, you will find, if you see the next slide, that these are all water bodies. The black spots which you see are basically water bodies. Okay, different types of water bodies. This is an old airport. This is a so-called Bengaluru wetland complex. And we have, many lakes which feed into that. And you can see that all these lakes are not independent, they're interdependent. But the problem is the interdependence has been ruptured or brutally attacked by construction, and that's because the ITBT corridor exerted its influence. We had formations like the Bangalore Agenda Task Force that Nanda Nilekani chaired under SM Krishna's government 20 years ago, and they effectively ensured that the tax havens that they created were all in this belt. The so-called SEZs came up here, and they did not qualify as urban projects because they were special economic zones. And like Bhargavi said, not only was the exemption from the environment impact assessment notification, It also exempted from planning norms. And in fact, reckless urbanization took place. And you see, this is the flooding that has taken place. So this is just a, if you zoom in, you can see better. But the point is that this is the region, you hardly find space for water. And if you just see to the southeast, you'll find a large area which is agrarian. But if you go there and do field verification, you'll find most farmers cannot cultivate because we throw the water that we consume into these lakes and they're filled. These waters used to be drinking water reservoirs, many of them. And now today you can't even touch the water. Forget even walking in and washing your face. But there are, in the 1980s, for instance, I have visited some lakes in this region, and I even drank water from them when we were doing the bird watching, the wetland survey to identify these lakes as waterfall habitats. And we found a huge number of birds coming from the Siberian and Mongolian region and Trans-Siberian and Mongolian region, and they have been coming for millions of years, and they found these wetlands useful. Now remember that these are all built wetlands. They were all carved out of existing streams. It doesn't mean that the birds just came after the wetlands were created. They were wetlands even before. But the farming and pastoral communities were intelligent enough to hold it back in a way that was useful to the immediate settlements that came around such wetlands, which were primarily agrarian. But if you see, this is a bund, this is a wet, and then downstream of the bund, you can see excavation has taken place. And then that's the area which has got flooded this year, which means that the wetlands where the paddies were grown, you went and built into it. Now, if you travel in the northeast, you will see that intelligent people who are farmers, when they live on the land, which is a wetland, they do not build foundations. They build it on stilts. Their houses are all on stilts. The water will rise and water will ebb. So the point is that they're always above the flood line. But we are, we know too much. We don't care to listen to what waterways are. And so what we do is we drain the waterway, we block the wetlands, and this is systemically happening through a construction of a complicitous network, which includes the corporates which demand properties and land for properties and inventories. There is huge amount of finance that builds these inventories. And then there is all sorts of weakening of laws and regulation. The most recent weakening happened when Prime Minister Narendra Modi called anybody who questions this kind of development an urban naxal. So suppose you resist the destruction of a lake, you're an urban naxal. So what should come up in a lake? It can be an SEZ, it can be Nandan Nilekan is Infosys building number 10, or Azim Premji's expansion of, Wipro got flooded. What it really means is that none of these very, very wealthy people who also have set up universities care to understand that the nature of land that they were building into was talking to them, but they were not listening. So my point is there's a gap between the gap is evident, and the fact that they do not listen to the nature of the land, and yet they have universities which are speaking back now and warning, this was predicted before. Now, this gap needs to be closed if we need to avoid this cycle. It is very difficult, it's not easy, but it doesn't come by throwing more concrete down. The first major thing we have to understand is to peel off the concrete, to open up spaces, because climate change is going to intensify such extreme weather events that we have seen. Thankfully, this year, the number of lives, actually one woman died, I think by electrocution, but it was a very, very low number, insignificantly low for the scale of the flooding that took place. A third of Bangalore was underwater. And you have seen the videos and pictures, I don't want to show that. And I want to end with this slide, which in fact the BBMP, our civic authority, has put out, wherein you see these waterways. Okay, now they are focusing only on this waterways. A good friend who is an architect, Naresh Narasimhan, is involved in rehabilitating these waterways. He's doing some interesting work. But a broader question is, does it include local communities? Yes, there is a lot of encroachments. And when there is a flood, what they do is the bulldozer Raj, which started in Uttar Pradesh, has come to Bangalore. They just go and smash houses. These houses were legally built. It's not the fault of people who built those houses. It's the fault of those who allowed those houses to be built, but they are not being penalized. And so we find that there are all sorts of tricks in the book that are being played out. Yesterday, the High Court of Karnataka the acting Chief Justice was appalled to hear that Bagmane Tech Park, which is a huge complex, which for 20 years, as we all know, has encroached lake and a waterway, refused to vacate it, and the BBMP, which should have broken down all the structures, didn't, and that caused a flooding, and not just the damage to that building, but the entire region. They started removing some of the encroachment, but quickly rushed to the office of the Lokayukta and got a stay, which is simply not possible because the court had warned last week that except the court, nobody else should interfere, because there is now the flooding is affecting the entire, the future of the city. It is at risk. The city will fail if this continues. I mean, just today the papers are talking about, how Devanali and the Bangalore International Airport area is going to become a futuristic city. Now, I don't understand what is futuristic here, because these are all nice words to use. But if we cannot yet understand that we have gone way in the wrong direction against nature's ways in terms of how water drains out, and this city has 3 very predominant valleys, and if you do not appreciate the fact that this water needs to find its way, and if you hold it back, you have to hold it back in a chain of lakes which are interconnected with these canals, and it's not right to just spend 10,000 crores or 5,000 crores in just aesthetically rehabilitating prime areas where canals run, which also happen to be where rich people live, but neglecting the wider peri-urban area. In fact, most of this region gets water from the Kaveri, which is drawn from 100 kilometers away. So we are importing water. Most of this region, and I live here, most of this region doesn't get Kaveri water. They draw from the ground. So here you'll find there is a net decrease in the groundwater aquifers here, very steep decrease. Where I live, groundwater was available 15 years ago at about 300 feet, 150 feet. Now you can't find it even 1,500 feet. Whereas you find water level as increasing here. And that's because we are importing Kaveri water, using it and throwing it back into the canals, and it is bringing up water levels as well. So, and the amount of water recharge area is also drastically come down in the central part of Bangalore. So now all of this is not something that is new. This has been understood, this has been spoken about, there have been seminars and meetings and all sorts of reports that have come out. I think we are tired of writing because there's so much we already know. It's just that I think there is that gap that is missing between, who's listening? I was listening to the 2 weeks ago with my father, who was 91, and he was talking about how we suffered flooding several times when we were growing up in one part of Bangalore. And we were listening together to the Chief Minister talk, to the A.T. Ramaswamy, who was part of a committee which identified the encroachment of commons, speak in the assembly. And all they were saying is, this was expected. Nobody said anything new. Nobody said, look, if you want to change this, you have to work ground up. You have to go and rehabilitate each and every lake and where water flows by involving local communities. Let's decentralize. What in fact was told by the Chief Minister eventually was that he was going to throw 1,500 to 2,000 crores in concretizing these canals. Now, be it in Bangalore or in Chennai or in Delhi, and Delhi also flooded last week, right? If you concretize canals, I think it's betrayal of common sense. These are sponges. They hold water. They release them slowly so that the canals will hold them a little longer in larger volumes and then release it to the next one. And then you have to capture water on the rooftops, use them, treat them, and make sure you I have a house which has 100,000 liters of storage. So 6 to 8 months, we don't need to depend on any outside input of water. So if we can do that, any house can do that. And it is not an expensive proposition. It's a very, very small cost of building a house. And it can also be done after you build a house. But if you look at how the rules are framed, they require everyone to put up this rainwater harvesting structure and rainwater recharge. But the regulatory system completely does not at all attend to the implementation of these laws. These laws have been there for 15 years. They're progressive. And they have thought through all this. But quite simply, there is, I think, a lack of serious, deep democratization of making common sense a fundamental part of decision making in the municipalism that is prevalent in Bangalore or Chennai or Bombay or Delhi or wherever. You just go and see and you know what we're talking about here. Thank you. I also want to say one more thing, people forget the fact that the Bhopal gas crime, I don't call it tragedy, would have been far more serious if there were no lakes in Bhopal. Thankfully, the methyl isocyanide got sucked into because of the winds that were carrying, and it got dissolved into the water. If there were no lakes, if all of that area was built up, just imagine the colossal loss of lives and the long-term impact on millions of lives. Not that we have done anything at all to, attend to the horrific suffering of those people. And this is not just about Bhopal. It's also happened in Visakhapatnam when there was a gas leak. So when you talk about lakes, it's not just about floods. They're also environmental sinks. And I find that the climate community, there is also this reductionism that has come in, where a lot of NGOs in sync with global communities are only talking about air as if it exists without interaction with soil and water and life and so on. I mean, if anything, the oxygen that we find has been created by life. It didn't just come like that. So somebody needs to, we need to understand what the Gaia hypothesis is all about. So the reductionist responses, even among civil society, is very problematic. There are specialists who only look at air. There are specialists who only look at water. There are specialists who only look at, this type of reductionism is also a serious causative factor. And the interdisciplinarity and the intersectoral appreciation of what it takes to create an healthy, urban, happy and lively human settlement, which we know existed in the past in many parts of this South Asian region, is quite simply lost on us because we seem to be completely educated with reductionist knowledge. Thank you.
Okay, great, Leo. Thanks. Thank you so much. Tripta, do you have any questions there?
Not so far, sir. No.
Okay,
But we have one hand raised.
Okay. So should okay. Let's go ahead with Mr. Sundarajan. Yeah.
Sundarajan ji, you can unmute and speak. Nevertheless, sir, Tikender sir, please go ahead.
Okay, so Leo, thank you. I didn't know. I wasn't aware that you also had those Siberian birds. We still get those Siberian birds in in Pong Dam in Himachal. So I'm really, I was not.
South Asia is part of the major flyway,
Yeah. So yeah.
They like the bar-headed geese, for instance, breed in Mongolia, but they come to South Asia and spread across South Asia in all the wetlands. And this is just one species. But what Subramanya, was a good friend and also one of the leading ornithologists, he did a study for us for the High Court, under the High Court's direction. And he found that there is a 70% loss in the last 20 years in terms of the numbers we found, both in terms of species diversity and also absolute numbers. And there are two factors for it. One, destruction of wetlands, and two, so-called development of wetlands into parks, creating subold.
Yeah, so thank you, Leo. It was really very interesting, both Bhargavi and Leo. And I just want to make just two short comments, just to substantiate what you just said. And I share some of my very funny anecdotes, and just to take that forward. You remember I used to host a show on the television called Agenda, Leo. And so the show used to be both indoor, that's in the studio, and also we used to take the studio out because it was urban. So we just wanted to have first-hand information about how urbanization is unfolding. And so we were like really curious because, Shah Rukh Khan is our contemporary. So, and how Shah Rukh Khan became Shah Rukh Khan is that famous serial called Fauji, which was shot around a lake in Gurgaon. So we said, okay, let's go to Gurgaon and let's see what has happened to the lake. You'll be shocked, Leo, that lake is gone now. And I was told he was literally drowned at one point of time in that lake while doing that shoot. And there's a real estate coming up. And we know how things have unfolded, and Gurgaon now the citizens like they really get scared the moment the clouds hover on their head. So yeah, that's one. The second thing I think, which is very important, that has to be, I mean, when you brought in the whole question of interdisciplinary, the whole into the whole process of this infrastructure building. And just to give you one very small example, and that comes from the British manual, I mean, how we should construct in the mountains. I mean, I'm not a great fan of the British, I mean, the colonial empire, but if the devil has to be given the credit. So while defining how the drains have to be constructed in the mountains, I'm talking about the mountains, they just emphasize that no concretization of the drains must take place. The stormwater drains must be open and it should be embanked so that your water sources gets recharged. And over the period, what we've seen is through all this municipal, pressure, most of the drains have been covered, and now they've turned out into nalas, and hardly anyone goes in. And then, I mean, and we can imagine how things are. I'm talking about the mountains where the garbage doesn't stay for long. The garbage just moves down at a very fast pace. So I think what is also important, Leo, which before anyone asks a question, because you spoke about municipalism, you spoke about democratization of the entire process. I mean, and also you spoke about rainwater, water harvest, water conservation, all. So, I mean, if I ask you, I mean, what are the 5 most important things if we have to, just prioritize as far as urban flooding is concerned? Because why I'm bringing this to the fact is, as you said, the whole question of reductionism, it's really ironical. So you have the disaster mitigation stuff, you have the disaster reduction plans, and the disaster risk reduction plans don't speak to the overall city development plans. And I remember while drawing the disaster mitigation plan for Patna, I said, sir, who will look at it? Because the state chairperson of Patna, he said, don't worry about who will look at the plan, you just draw the plan. We drew the plan, and 7-8 months down the line, Patna was flooded. So, my point is, so I mean, if those 5 important things that must be prioritized, because I don't think this can go for long. I mean, we know this is not a sustainable way. This is not the way how sustainability. I mean, we can talk about even sustainability, given the reality. So, Leo, how would you like to respond to that? And then maybe we can have some questions. And yeah,
I think I would invite Bhargavi to share that slide, and she actually listed out steps that are.
Okay, Bhargavi, please.
Yeah, Bhargavi, if you can, if you can emphasize this, I wouldn't say 5 or 3 or 4, but so yeah, if you can explain this, why this is happening and how to get out of it. You're muted.
Yeah, I personally think, at this stage, it's very important to revive our ward committees, and everybody take a look at the 11th and the 12th schedule, because our villages are also close by and they are also facing similar issues, and understand what are the functions of local governments, and everybody should be looking at their own neighborhoods. So at the ward level, first of all, identify the water bodies, understand the gradients, understand what kind of encroachments have taken place. And the local people have to be part of this exercise, and also map out the vulnerable communities and start a plan ground up like that. I think that will be the only way to go, because COVID happened and everywhere we just, did a band-aid solution. It was like a quick fix to address that. And when COVID happened, we thought that things are going to change. People will learn, our systems will learn, our parastatals will wake up. But no, business is started as usual. So it has to start at the ward level, where local people will be part of that exercise. They understand where their homes are sitting. So today it could be lakes, but tomorrow it could be something else, right? So, and we need to understand that. So I guess that would be the starting point.
And to add to that, I think the High Court of Karnataka went into this question. So what are the steps? And Justice N.K. Patil committee report is not just about Bangalore or Karnataka. It is actually, it speaks to the situation across the country, especially in urbanized areas. And it argues that, if you want to correct the damage we have done, particularly to our urban context, then it has to be by building it ground up, governing water bodies ground up, where each and every lake will have its own lake protection committee, which will work in sync with the ward committees. That would mean a lake is defined under the Karnataka Tank Conservation Development Authority as not just the water body, but the canal as well and its watershed. So it's a very expansive definition. So when you destroy the watershed and then you say, the lake is full of silt, it's a no-brainer why it happened, right? And if you say that it's flooding and I should not be flooded because the concrete canal is supposed to take the water, there's only so much that water can do. It cannot miraculously evaporate and not come in a solid liquid form to attack you. Water doesn't want to attack us. It just wants to flow by. But we weaponize water. So I think we should do everything to de-weaponize water in ways that it becomes nourishing and nurturing. And the Patil committee also talks about the legal limits. When we say legal limits, we must understand these are the common areas. All that the committee is saying is at least leave the commons alone, the waterways, the grazing pastures. Let water sink there so that our cities do not become extractive and draw water from faraway sources. Instead, they are able to pull water from the rain and draw it from the ground, but replenished by the rain every season. So that's why this, thanks Bhargavi for this slide. They're interconnected. And so unless we work in a decentralized way, building it ground up, where we ensure that our urban settings are not energy intensive, material intensive, and extractive, we're going to be part of this vicious cycle over and over. And once we reclaim the commons, the water commons in particular, I think to govern them, you need a culture. And that culture was quite extensively known from Harappan times till now. But we lost it in the post-colonial phase because of acute centralization. So I think one of the first things we need to do is disband parastatals. If Bangalore has been destroyed, it is by Bangalore Development Authority. If Delhi is flooded, it is because of Delhi Development Authority, and same with Mumbai and so on. These are parastatals who are not accountable to the people. They're extremely undemocratic. They're anti-constitutional bodies. The Constitution demands that it has to, all planning and governance and administration of urban areas or rural areas has to be a participatory and democratic exercise. And who are these guys to come and tell us that, they know better? You see, I think there has to be a sense of anger now in people. And if people don't have anger now, I think we are destined to be doomed. I'm just thinking, 1/3 of Pakistan gets flooded. How? Okay, we had a heat wave and the glacial melt, but how do you destroy so many millions of homes? What do you do now to that country? And this is not that it is not going to happen to India. Just imagine if there is a glacial melt in the Gangetic Plain and the havoc it will create in the Himalayan region and the Gangetic Plain. You see, so I think we are just, we are saying it didn't happen to me, so it won't happen to me. So I think that notion of, I would say, fake survivalism has to go. We have the intelligence. It's put away in a locker. We have to bring it out and put it on the table and use it.
Great. So, Dipta, can you take it from here? And then maybe there are a few questions or maybe interventions that somebody wants to make. We have some 15 minutes to go.
So we have Mahalya ma'am. Mahalya ma'am, over to you.
Oh, good evening, everybody. And it was a great talk. Now, the story of Bengaluru is the story of each and every city and town in India now. We talk of the metropolitan cities come into our view. They are in the focus, so we know about them. But we forget about smaller cities and towns. They are having the same fate. That in India, the tropical country, We wait for the rains, but when the rain comes, the cities are the worst sufferers, cities and towns are the worst sufferers, maybe because of bad planning, no planning at all, or the super activity of the so-called real estate agent and anything else. Thanks for this excellent presentation and bringing up all the issues together. I have just one question. I echo with Leo on that point that parastatals should be banned. Even in the 74th Amendment, when everything was considered, a single line has not been told about the parastatals and what is going to be their relation with the so-called elected representative bodies and others. And that is a great, I should say, the lacuna of this 74th Amendment. They forgot about the parastatals. They forgot about the fact that the parastatals ruled the whole urban development process in the post-colonial period, post-independence period, I should say. Yes, we should bring up the, we should gear up to kind of these ward committees and others. But I think that is not enough because, the way it happens in this way, ward committees ultimately they will become tentacles of the ruling political parties and others. And again, the actual voice would get lost if there is no particular framework for all these things. Now, when I inquired in the Disaster Management Committee of Kolkata Municipal Corporation, what do they do? What is their job? They just told me that when they get indications from the meteorological department that something is going to happen, what they only do, they check for the vulnerable areas and they do the arrangements so that these people can be shifted. These people can be shifted to a shelter or something like if the disaster happens. No, this is not going to the job for a disaster management committee. Why should these people, vulnerable people, they will be in a position that they have to be shifted if a disaster comes, and then again they go back to the same place. So I think the need for the day is a good scientific framework for all these situations, how to use the water, not wasting them in floods and others.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
etc. Thank you.
I think, Leo, it'll be nice if you could respond to that maybe query or point, because what Mahalaya ma'am is saying is that, the ward committees or, ward sabhas couldn't just be, so what could be another framework? I mean, can visualize that framework or as you said, that it could be tentacles of the ruling party, but we do not have those tentacles at all, because I am a witness to a fact that the elected councillor doesn't want to form a ward sabha and a ward committee.
Yes, that is
then
also
it takes
fact.
over the space of the. So, Leo, please respond to that.
I want to say that, politics is a part of our life. Any act that we engage in public is a political act, and perhaps even in private life, we have a lot of politics. The point is that in public life, to expect a lack of politics, I think is, I would say, expecting utopia. And I wouldn't say politics causes dystopia. Politics is a very healthy, natural response of humans interacting with each other and working with the agencies of power. And those who have power then exert it, and those who don't suffer from the lack of it. So this is a game that will go on forever. It's not something that you can escape. So I think the important thing is how do you have a mature response to it? And I think we are capable of that. And that's why I said, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, when the Harappans built their city, it was not like they didn't have politics, but they made sure it did not affect the water systems, that the dirty water mixed with the good water and destroyed everyone's health. For almost 1.5 to 2,000 years, those settlements survived. We don't have our city surviving even 50, 60 years.
Exactly.
You get what I'm saying? It's not like they didn't have politics, right? So the point is, even ward committees need to be. I actually like working with politicians of all shades, the very clean to the very corrupt, because they are representative of the nature of society. The bureaucracy, unfortunately, doesn't speak what they feel. They speak what you want, what is to be heard in that forum. Very rarely do you see bureaucracy speak the truth. And that, I think, is the serious problem. So both in planning, governance, and administration, if we root out bureaucratization, bureaucracies are supposed to be the servants of the public's interaction with the people's representatives, and the aspirations and the imaginations that are the outcomes turning into plans and schemes and being implemented by the bureaucrats. Today we have the bureaucrats being ruled by the super politicians, that is the chief ministers and one or two very powerful ministers. And now the prime minister himself will tell us how to deal with floods from Delhi. You have a flood in Noida, the prime minister's office will get involved. He has a job to take care of the country. His job is not to take care of cities, right? So I think the lack of federal systems, the fact that the state finance commissions, which were set up as part of the 74th Amendment, which were meant to decentralize financing of cities and rural areas, meant to build federal federated governance systems in which the state and the center and local governments are partners. There's no gradation as saying, one is more powerful than the other. They're partners. They have different roles. I think that's the imagination which is in the Constitution. I think we need to, you are a deputy mayor, right? So you have an acute understanding of what it is to work with communities at that level in Shimla. So was Motilal Nehru, so was Jawaharlal Nehru, so was Radhakrishnan. They were all councillors. They also became great politicians and statesmen because they rose from those levels which gave them the grounding necessary to highlight the type of systems that are required to manage an entire country. Today, we are not even helping anyone gain such experience.
Great.
It's because corruption has become legalized. PM CARES fund is a corrupt system because it isn't transparent. And how can you expect stormwater drain funding to be transparent?
Yeah.
Many contractors are asking us, if PM CARES fund is not open book, why should this be open book? And I don't find anything wrong in that argument.
Yeah.
It's a very sensible, logical argument.
Great, Leo. Thank you so much. And Tripta, I think you can take over from here and maybe thank our guests, because it's been a lovely presentation.
Sure, sir. Thank you. As we come to an end to this extremely enlightening discussion, I, Tripta Behra, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to formally propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, CHURS. We'd like to express our gratitude to the moderator for today's session, Shri Tikender Singh Panwar. We would like to thank our esteemed discussants for today, Mr. Leo F. Saldanha and Ms. Bhargavi S. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for adding your diverse perspectives and valuable insights to the deliberation. And of course, we thank all of our participants here on Zoom or on Facebook Live for participating and raising pertinent questions. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. I hope that you continue to tune in the future to our #local governance series and IMPRI #web policy talks. Thank you all once again, and I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.